I am Professor Dr. Sanjay Kumar Shah, Head of the Department, Bosundhara Addin Medical College, Department of Medicine. Our today's topic is chronic liver disease. So we know that it is very much important for our MBBS curriculum, and usually short case and long case frequently given in final prop examination. In chronic liver disease, first of all, etiology. In number one etiology in our aspect is viral cause, hepatitis B and C. But in developed country, in addition to viral cause, another cause is alcoholic liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, followed by non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, and another cause is genetic causes. These are the hemochromatosis, Wilson disease, and very rare cause autoimmune disease. These are the important cause. In your exam, in board viva, frequently asked what are the causes of chronic liver disease. According to prevalence of the disease and incidence, you should first tell the viral causes, then metabolic cause, then genetic cause, then autoimmune cause. So, what are the clinical features of chronic liver disease? We know that liver has several functions. First of all, synthetic function, then metabolism of liver fat, carbohydrate, metabolism of protein, fat and carbohydrate, and some synthetic function. Most of the protein are synthesis in liver, albumin, some coagulation factors, etc., and some storage function, vitamin B12, iron, vitamin D, and some excretory function, bilirubin, and etc. So liver is a very some excretory function. Another function is excretion of drug. So in case of chronic liver disease, liver cell is fibrosed and necrosed, and no functional activity is there, and so some clinical features is occurring in cirrhotic patient. These are the first of all, from head to toe for memorize. In case of face, we use jaundice. So we should know the stigmata of chronic liver disease. The stigmata for memorization from head to toe. These are the jaundice, parotid swelling, and two things. In case of chest, spider nevi and gynecomastia. In hands, clubbing, leukonychia, palmar erythema, Dupuytren's contracture, and last of all, testicular atrophy. These are the stigmata of chronic liver disease. And we know that in case of chronic liver disease, portal hypertension frequently occurs. What are the signs of portal hypertension? First of all, splenomegaly. This is the definite sign of portal hypertension. Another is some varices is in esophageal varices, rectal varices, portosystemic shunting. Due to portosystemic shunting, hepatic encephalopathy, so ascites and hypersplenism. So in exam board frequently asked question, features of cirrhosis and features of portal hypertension. Students are commonly mistake these features. So in case of portal hypertension, you should know the first of all splenomegaly, hypersplenism, which is evidenced by pancytopenia, then portosystemic anastomosis in different sites like caput medusae, spider caput medusae, and collateral circulation, some ascites, and hepatic encephalopathy. What are the complications of cirrhosis? First complication of cirrhosis is ascites complicated by spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Second thing is portal hypertension with its complication. Third thing is hepatic encephalopathy. 4, hepatopulmonary syndrome and hepatorenal syndrome. Last of all, hepatoma. These are the common complications of chronic liver disease. What are the features of decompensated liver disease? So, in case of decompensated liver disease, increasing ascites, increasing jaundice and rupture, variceal bleeding and hepatic encephalopathy and ascites not response to diuretics, and also cirrhosis turns to hepatoma. These are the common features of decompensation of chronic liver disease. Why this is important? It is important as because majority chronic liver disease patient is stable, but when it turns to decompensation, the prognosis is bad. We assess this decompensation by Child-Pugh classification. We know that what are the parameters of Child-Pugh classification: ascites, jaundice, prothrombin time and encephalopathy. These are the features of parameter of Child-Pugh classification. We assess the prognosis of chronic liver disease. Now, how will investigate chronic liver disease? Before going to investigation, for memorization, you should know the 3 headlines. First of all, to establish the diagnosis of chronic liver disease. So, the liver disease. Second thing, to find out the cause of the liver disease, and third, to find out the etiology of the find out the complication of the chronic liver disease. In 3 headline you practice, then you should normally memorize the point of investigation. First of all, to establish the chronic liver disease, we should do the liver function test. What are the liver function tests? These are the albumin, total protein, albumin globulin ratio, prothrombin time. So, these functions should be altered in case of chronic liver disease. Prothrombin time will be increased, albumin will be decreased, globulin will be increased, ultimately albumin globulin ratio will be decreased. And ultrasonogram of the hepatobiliary system and liver will be shrunken. Liver will be shrunken, and in case of portal hypertension, there will be splenomegaly and ascites. There will be splenomegaly and ascites. So in this, and fibroscan of the liver, So, to establish the cirrhosis of liver, so we think 3 genes: liver function test, biochemical marker of liver, then ultrasonogram and fibroscan. Then to find out the cause, I already described the most important cause is liver viral hepatitis B and C. So, we have to do HBsAg, NT-HBC, NT-HBC, HBeAg and hepatitis B virus DNA load. These 4 things we always do, as because we have to find out there is a viral replication. If there is a NT-HBC in case of chronic liver disease, HBsAg will be positive and NT-HBC will be positive. NT-HBC, IgG for NT-HBC or NT-HBC total indicate in chronicity of the liver disease. In case of replication of virus, in addition to positivity of HBs and NT-HBC, HBeAg will be positive and hepatitis B virus DNA will be detected more than 20,000. Another cause is alcohol and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. We exclude this by history and liver biopsy. Genetic disorder, chronic liver disease, we can identify by first of all, most common Wilson's disease by measurement of serum ceruloplasmin and urinary copper level, along with serum ferritin for hemochromatosis and serum iron load. In addition to this, very less common cause is autoimmune liver disease. So, we can do for ANA, CANCA, PANCA, anti-LKM, anti-mitochondrial antibody, etc. But this is very much rare cause, usually occur in female, and when cirrhotic patient no cause found, unknown cause, then we think that it may be autoimmune cause and must be association, maybe association with other autoimmune disorder like SLE, PSS, rheumatoid arthritis, etc., etc. So, as a clinician you should correlate which investigation should be fast. So, in our country, we are poor country, we have to maximum benefit by low resource. So, you think first, you think which etiology is first. So, before going to liver biopsy, you have to find out which etiology is first. So, in our prospect, two etiology very much common, hepatitis B, C and metabolic disorder. So, metabolic alcohol and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. One important thing I want to share with you, we know that in case of cirrhosis of liver, liver is shrunken. In exam, we frequently ask a question, what is the liver dullness in case of cirrhosis of liver? In case of cirrhosis of liver dullness in liver will be shifted upwards. So, in normal liver dullness, obliteration is right fifth intercostal space, but in case of cirrhosis, liver is shrunken and upwards. So, it will be in fourth intercostal space along mid clavicular line in right sided. So, when and liver will not be palpable, but in case of liver is palpable and liver is enlarged and tender and hard, you think it may be turns into malignancy. So, as a clinician, when you kept in your mind, in cirrhotic patient, liver usually not palpable, liver dullness is normally obliteration is right fifth intercostal space, then we think this cirrhotic patient may turns to malignancy. But several causes of chronic liver disease, liver may be palpable. What are the causes? Number one causes is metabolic disorder, genetic disorder and metabolic disorder. These are the alcoholic liver disease, alcoholic chronic liver disease, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, following hemochromatosis, Wilson's disease. These four things, these four causes may causes enlarged liver despite of cirrhosis. So, remember that in case of cirrhosis, liver will be shrunken, no liver will be palpable, but in case of metabolic or genetic disorder, liver is palpable, enlarged and usually non-tender and hard. The four conditions I already described, but in case of liver cirrhotic patient background cirrhosis, liver is hard, tender and enlarged. You should keep in your mind these cirrhotic patient may turns to malignancy, HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma. Now, I telling you the explanation of the complication of the liver disease. First of all, the most frequent complication of chronic liver disease is ascites. We know why ascites occurs in cirrhotic patient. Usually, splanchnic vasodilatation. Do you know splanchnic vasodilatation? Systemic nitric oxide which may causes the vasodilatation, ultimately fluid accumulation in the pelvic cavity. Second thing, in portal hypertension, normal portal pressure usually 2 to 3 millimeter, but in case of hypertension it will be more than 12 millimeter of mercury. Third thing, increased hydrostatic pressure due to low albumin synthesis. So, in frequently asked in question asked why ascites occurs in chronic liver disease. Three things. First of all, splanchnic vasodilatation due to systemic nitric oxide which causes vasodilatation first. Second thing, portal hypertension. Third, increased hydrostatic pressure due to loss of protein synthesis in liver. So, this is the ascites. So, how can we manage this ascites of the liver, chronic liver disease patient? General measures. First of all, explain the patient why ascites occurs and how to treat this ascites. First of all, salt restriction along with salt containing drug, usually 100 millimole per day, in very severe cases 40 millimole per day, but fluid restriction along with 0.1 to 0.5 liter, 1 liter to 0.5 liter fluid restriction. These will help to reduce the accumulation of fluid in the peritoneal cavity. But in this general measure, when we fail, then we add potassium sparing diuretics, spironolactone. First of all, we started 100 milligram per day, then gradually increasing up to 400 milligram per day. But despite of general measures and spironolactone in maximum dosage, ascites when not responding, then we use loop diuretics, furosemide up to 160 milligram per day. But when fail to respond ascites, how can we measure? Every day we bedside weight the patient, abdominal girth and urine output. This question is frequently asked in exam. How can you assess clinically bedside your treatment, conservative treatment in responding or not in case of ascites? So, by three things. First of all, bedside weight everyday patient, then abdominal girth and urine output. These three things monitoring will help you to reduce ascites by conservative treatment. When conservative treatment like fluid restriction, salt restriction along with avoiding salt containing drug, then spironolactone up to 400 milligram per day plus furosemide 160 milligram per day not responding with this conservative treatment, then it is called refractory ascites. It is very much important, very important question in our exam in written and viva board. What is refractory ascites? How can we treat this? In case of refractory ascites, we treated giving salt for human albumin, usually 20% 100 ml albumin given. At the same time, paracentesis is done up to 3 to 5 liter fluid per day. It will help to reduce the ascitic fluid which disturb the patient. Another so many photosystemic shunting tips, but it is rarely done nowadays. But when all things are fail, then liver transplantation is the another option. Now, the second thing is happening in case of ascitic patient. These are the spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. Usually single organism like E. coli, Enterococcus, Klebsiella like organism which may causes the peritonitis, but source of organism is could not be detected, usually not unknown, site source of infection usually unknown. So, how can we assess in clinically when ascitic patient, cirrhotic patient with ascites may come to you fever, abdominal pain and encephalopathy, three things you should keep in your mind. The patient may suffering from spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. When we examine the patient, the abdomen is distended, muscle gardening, but sometime in case of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis affected by the patient, have no abdominal symptom, but only fever and hepatic encephalopathy may present. So, in case of spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, ascites complicated by SBP. So, no abdominal symptom, you should not exclude the SBP or any secondary infection. So, in that cases hepatic encephalopathy and fever may only presenting sign. Secondly, so how will laboratory investigation confirm the spontaneous bacterial peritonitis? First of all, we aspirate the ascitic fluid, and total count will be neutrophil will be 250 per cubic millimeter, and WBC will be 500, and protein will be high and glucose will be decreased. But how can we differentiate it from secondary? An organism will be single organism in culture in case of SBP, but how can we differentiate? Is it secondary infection? In that cases ascitic fluid study total count will be more than 10,000 profuse neutrophil, and protein will be more than 1 gram per dl, and sugar will be less than 50%. So, why sugar decrease here? As because bacteria utilize the sugar, and in case of culture multiple organism found in case of secondary infection. How can treat this patient? First of all, in ascitic patient complicated by spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, it is very much this is a sign of a decompensated liver disease, and in that cases we should hospitalize the patient and start a broad spectrum antibiotic. These are the cefuroxime or cefotaxime antibiotics along with other conservative measures. In that cases, along with hepatic encephalopathy with SBP, all diuretics should be stopped. And we should care on at the same time treatment on hepatic encephalopathy. So, in case of what are the hepatic encephalopathy in case of liver disease? We know the liver detoxifies some toxic materials, but in case of diseased liver, these toxic materials bypass the liver, enter in brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier and activate the GABA neurotransmitter. So, patient will be confusion, convulsion and coma. Or the grading of hepatic encephalopathy, grade 1. First of all, alteration of sleep pattern. Second of all, patient is drowsy but responds to voice. Grade 3, patient is marked drowsy but responds to painful stimuli, and grade 4, patient suffering from marked coma. This grading is helpful for early treatment of the patient of hepatic encephalopathy. In case of hepatic encephalopathy in chronic liver disease, it is a sign of decompensated chronic liver disease. I already described. How can we what are the factors these encephalopathy precipitate? First factor, some drugs which precipitate the hepatic encephalopathy. These are the all types of sedative, antipsychotic, antidepressant drugs. Another is dehydration, hypokalemia, and over protein load. Protein load means increased GI bleeding and constipation, etc. So, in clinically we assess the patient hepatic encephalopathy by grading. Along some investigation is there. One important investigation is EEG, electroencephalogram of the brain. We know the brain have a normal alpha wave, but in case of hepatic encephalopathy, this alpha wave is slowing, replaced by delta wave. In previously we do ammonia level of the blood, but in nowadays it is invalid, as because there are several conditions which may causes the increases blood ammonia level. So, a definitive investigation for hepatic encephalopathy is a clinical sign along with EEG, electroencephalogram. How can we manage this? First of all, we have to clear the gut by giving lactulose, and these lactulose help us toxin producing gut bacteria reducing. How can? It is very much important in our Viva exam how lactulose is working to prevent hepatic encephalopathy or treatment of encephalopathy. But the 4-way lactulose is working. First of all, it acts as a osmotic laxative, so wash out the bacteria. Second is reduce the colonic pH, where in this environment these bacteria cannot grow. Third, in ammonia containing substance incorporated into this bacteria wash out by lactulose. So in our treatment, gut sterilization, for gut sterilization lactulose is very much important. But in case of diarrhea patient, how can we treat? In case of diarrhea, we use usually rifaximin. These are the way of treatment of hepatic encephalopathy. In a brief, first of all, avoiding all precipitating factor, then maintain hydration. 3 number, gut sterilizing agent, lactulose or rifaximin, which is suitable for the patient. Third thing, what are the bad prognostic sign of chronic liver disease? Bad prognostic sign. First of all, increasing jaundice, ascites and photosystemic encephalopathy. This is the clinical parameter, and laboratory parameter I also tell you, these are the sodium level, albumin level and prothrombin time. But there is a bad to assess the prognosis. I already told you that the Child-Pugh classification, Child-Pugh parameter, which may causes the we can evaluate the patient bad prognosis of the patient. So this question is frequently asked in your Viva exam. So some small this is all about the brief in hepatic cirrhosis of liver along with its management. Another important thing is hepatorenal syndrome, which is complication of the chronic liver disease, but it is less common in your MBBS curriculum. But in case of those who are, but it should be know you. First of all, there is two types of hepatorenal syndrome is occur, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 oliguria increase creatinine level and decrease urine sodium excretion less than 10 millimole per day, increase plasma osmolarity it more than 1.5. So in that cases way of prognosis is bad and way of treatment is terlipressin and albumin infusion. So mortality will be high in that type 1 hepatorenal syndrome. Liver transplantation is the only way of treatment. Second, type 2 hepatorenal syndrome. It is prognosis is good, usually occurs in refractory ascites. We are giving diuretics in maximum dosage, but urine output is not adequate. In that cases, how can we overcome this? These are the only way mortality is rate if early liver transplantation could done. So in a nutshell, very few minutes I want to tell you, in chronic liver disease very much important chapter, and it is frequently asked in Viva board, short case, long case, and some written question is here. Another written question, how will you manage hematemesis melena in case of chronic liver disease patient? We know that in case of hematemesis melena, in case of chronic liver disease, number one we think it is a rupture esophageal varices. Another thing, peptic ulcer disease. So first one is very much common, as because in case of chronic liver disease, peptic ulcer disease incidence is high. So we should keep in mind how can we manage this patient. It is our medical emergency, and many patients attend our emergency department with this complaint. So ABC management, airway, breathing, circulation fluid, and send the liver function test along with blood group and cross matching, and started blood for maintaining hemoglobin more than 10 gram per liter, and along with we terlipressin injection when patient is stable. Then we go endoscopy and variceal band ligation. So here we variceal band ligation followed by propranolol, non-selective beta blocker, propranolol or nadolol. One important question is frequently asked in Viva board and comes in written exam. How will you manage rupture esophageal varices, or what are the primary or secondary prevention of rupture esophageal varices management. So in case of rupture esophageal varices, we go for ABCD management, terlipressin when patient will be stable, then go endoscopy, and according to endoscopy we band ligation. These are the way, but and followed by secondary prevention, beta blocker. So in that cases, when event is occur, we go for procedure followed by secondary prevention. Secondary prevention may to prevent the recurrence of the rupture. But in case of stable patient, esophageal varices is there, it may be grade 3 or 4, but no bleeding occur. So we give primary prevention at the same way. If you want giving band ligation, if patient is afford or facility is available, and or giving beta blocker. But study says that two measures are equally effective in case of primary prevention of esophageal varices. So this is all about chronic liver disease with complication and management. Hope you will enjoy. If any problem, we will discuss in next class. Thank you.